because I looked onto Jim when he presented at the Ohio Western Reserve Land Conservancy a few years ago, and I found his presentation and his book a really great resource for gardeners like me who really try to focus on gardening for insects, especially caterpillars, which are critical to our local birds and neotropical migrating birds. Jim worked for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources for 31 years as a botanist and later specialized in wildlife diversity projects for the Division of Wildlife. He has authored or co-authored 6 books, including Birds of Ohio, Lone Pine 2024, and Wild Ohio, The Best of the Natural Heritage, Kent State University Press 2009. This book won the 2010 Ohio is that how you say that word, Jim? Ohioan?
Ohioana.
Oh, that's what my husband said. I told him he was wrong. Thank you. He's not in earshot, thankfully. Um, it won the Ohioania Book Award. He is the co-author of the Ohio Breeding Bird Atlas 2 book. His book, Gardening for Moths, in collaboration with Chelsea Gottfried, was released in February of 23. He writes a column, Nature, for the Columbus Dispatch and regularly publishes a natural history blog. He has written numerous articles in a variety of publications and has delivered hundreds of presentations throughout the eastern U.S. He was named 2015 Conservation Communicator of the Year by the Ohio League of Sportsmen. Jim's an avid photographer, shooting a range of natural history subjects. He's had hundreds of photos published in various forums, including the TV show Jeopardy! So welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Barb. Thank you for inviting me too. Let me do the screen share here. Make sure it works. All right, do you see something? Well, I'm going to assume everyone can see this.
Yes, it looks
Yes.
good. Thank you.
It looks, yes.
Great. Okay, off we go. I'm going to get going because I have a lot to say. Thanks, Barb, again for having me. It's a pleasure. And I'm going to talk about moths today, and roughly based on this book that you see the cover on the left, Gardening for Moths, that I did with a remarkable woman named Chelsea Gottfried. And basically, we wanted to give moths some limelight. Butterflies steal most of that. Moths play a massive role in our environment, as we will see. So the book covers this range outlined in orange, and it's admittedly innovative, but basically, once you start to get out of the orange area, the plant communities start to shift pretty radically. And that changes the moth community. Moths and plants are tied together intimately, and certain species of plants equal certain species of moths. So roughly the moth fauna in that orange area is about the same, and it covers, I think, parts of 10 states. And then the other pragmatic reason, if you do a book and you do gardening for moths in Ohio, no one outside the state of Ohio will buy the book, even though the moths would be the same in most of the areas here. So it's a regional book. This is from the frontispiece of the book. The bottom line is all butterflies are moths, and there is no such thing as butterflies. And I'll make that clear as we move along why that is. So humans have been pretty rough on things. We've imperiled legions of native flora and fauna. I will just use my own state as an example here. We have about 1,800 native plant species. That would roughly be true for all those orange states on the map. And over 1/3 of those native plants in Ohio are formally listed in some category of imperilment by RDNR. And that also would be largely true for all those states that I showed you. So the bottom line is we've made a lot of plants rare, and even the so-called common ones are generally far less common than they used to be. And that affects our moths. So, I could end the slide here, but then we wouldn't get to look at a lot of cool photos of moths. But this is the bottom line. Native plants grow moths, non-natives generally do not. There is no coevolutionary history between our moths and something like a Norway maple that was brought here very recently. There's a few generalists that will even use plants like that, but the numbers plummet. I mean, plummet majorly when you're faced with a flora that's non-indigenous as opposed to a native flora. So this is what we do, humans. We do this very well. Here's a subdivision that laid waste to some really nice habitat and woods, and in its wake has left no habitat really. And then we love to name these things epitaphically, as you can see from the sign, whispering oaks. Well, the whispering oaks whisper no more. They've all been cut down to develop that, and this is going on everywhere. Development is rampant, not just in my state. In Ohio, not so much down your way, probably as much, but half of the state of Ohio is in agriculture. And most of that orange map that I showed you, that's the case. That's America's breadbasket, essentially, the Great Plains Prairie. And once John Deere launched his chisel plow in 1837, the prairies fell fast, remarkably fast. They are great growers of corn and wheat and soybeans. And that's what this picture, this is a former prairie that was massive north of Columbus, Ohio, that I took from the airplane. I used to fly a lot for work, and just showing what it looks like now. So we've lost 99.99% of all those prairies. It's really amazing. So, and that meant the loss of who knows how many moths we didn't even know that we had that are now gone. And then if you're a moth, this would be a worst case scenario. That's my city, Columbus, Ohio. And moth to a flame, we've all heard that they're attracted to lights, and some types of lights more than others, but they're generally sinks for them. They don't get back out of that sphere of light to go out and reproduce. And in the case of this picture, there's no habitat left anyway for them, or native plants. But we still have a lot of habitat available for moths. And the great thing about them, just like butterflies, is you can work with them in your own yard. This is my front yard in Worthington, Ohio. A couple years ago, and I was heavy on purple coneflower, but the yard's only a little more than a third of an acre, typical suburbia, and it's just jam-packed with native flora. And I get all kinds of cool animals in my yard, not just moths. So anyone can do this. It's not hard. And you all know this. I'm speaking to the choir here, I suspect. So why care about moths? The great thing about doing a Zoom like this is you've already read all those bullet points. I don't have to read them, but I'll just single out the middle one. They're absolutely critical parts of food webs. I'll make that case as we move along. It's just remarkable. The loss that it would be if we were to lose moths, and how many other things would be lost as a result of that. So moths are part of the great order Lepidoptera. This is one of the largest groups of animals on Earth, and it's the butterflies and the moths. Lepidoptera have been around a long time. They date back in the fossil record nearly 200 million years ago. Butterflies split from this lineage of moths, because that's what they are, much, much more recently, about 55 million years ago. And so far, nearly 200,000 species are described worldwide. And that's probably the tip of the iceberg, believe it or not. There's probably way, way, way more awaiting discovery. This is in the moth world, not so much the butterfly world. And I'll share you a dramatic example of that later in the talk, how many might still be out there. But anyway, so we got about 160,000 moths flying around the world, and that's 8 times as many as the known butterfly species, which are much better known than moths are. So there's a lot of them. That's the bottom line there. Problem is they haven't had much good press. Butterflies have had a lot of good press. You could fill a library with poetry like this about butterflies, and all of it's flattering. I've never seen negative publicity for butterflies. Everyone likes them. They're diurnal, they're easy to see, and they're often very beautiful, like these spicebush swallowtails. These, by the way, this was shot in the wild in southern Ohio in a forest, and they're pollinating one of our few native azaleas. This is called the pinkster flower azalea. And these day-flying butterflies, these swallowtails, are probably the only really good pollinator of azaleas, at least this one. So they do a lot of work, but they're pretty and we can see them easily. There's a painted lady, one of our most common butterflies. It's on our most common aster in this part of the world, the uh, white heath aster. If you're, the asters used to be in the genus aster. You could teach a first grader to say a genus name, aster. Now it's Symphyotrichum. So this is Symphyotrichum pilosum. Anyway, the painted lady has been known to be released in mass at weddings. Show me a wedding where they release a bunch of moths in mass. It ain't going to happen. That'd be considered a very bad omen. This is how moths typically have been treated. This is some of you have seen this movie, I'm sure, Silence of the Lambs, Anthony Hopkins, Hannibal Lecter, a very dark movie, and the totem of the movie was a death's head hawk moth with the little skull in the back. You can kind of see why film producers might get the idea to do something with moths, though they can look pretty eerie. And this is the biggest moth that regularly occurs in North America. It's a tropical species called the black witch. The northern limits is normally the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, but they're highly mobile and they wander. And Virginia gets a number of these every year, I'm sure. Up here in Ohio, we get at least several that get reported a year. It's bigger than a bat. I mean, we're talking giant here. The Spanish name for it is Mariposa de la Muerte, the butterfly of death. So, again, there are no real butterflies that are butterflies of death that I know. Oh, here's Mothman on the left. Mothman was a mythical moth yeti sort of creature that flew around the Ohio River Valley in the 60s around Point Pleasant, West Virginia. In 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed over the Ohio River from Ohio to Point Pleasant. And there's something like 44 fatalities in that. It was a horrible disaster, but this Mothman was implicated in that, blamed for that. Oh, and on the right is Mothra doing battle with Godzilla in a Japanese sci-fi movie. So very, very different reputation for moths as opposed to butterflies. One of the impetuses for us, Chelsea and I, doing that book to bring them into a better light. They certainly can be cute. They're highly interesting, especially as a photographer. They're just a fascination. This is one that's near you. It's a oak specialist, primarily, a dot-lined white. It's really cute. It looks like a little fuzzy yak or something, Lepidopteran yak looking over the leaf. There's its caterpillar. I'm going to talk about those too, because they're such an important part of the story. But this is looking face on into the caterpillar of the species that we just saw on a twig. Here it is from the side. This is botanical mimicry writ large. And botanical memory is super common in the world of moths. If you can look like that, just sort of a raised hump on a twig and sit there all day during the day when the birds are feeding and flying around, they're liable never to see you. And that's the whole intent here. There's lots of cool caterpillars. A lot of people are more interested in the caterpillars of moths than they are the moths themselves. Here's a neat little moth, very common. It's kind of an oak hickory specialist, the white dotted prominent. Kind of neat, but look at the caterpillar. Crazy. This is snake mimicry. That's a thing too in this world. It's a fairly hefty little caterpillar, and if it's threatened by a chickadee, it will first raise its head up in the air like the snake charmer's cobra coming out of the basket and sway side to side. Those aren't its eyes at all. Those are the mandibles that are flared and pushed together to create the illusion of scary eyes. If the bird keeps pushing it, it'll throw its head over the coil just like a snake would, and looks all the world like that. A lot of weird things going on in this world. This is one of the big silk moths that would be common in your area, the tulip tree silk moth, mostly a specialist on tulip tree, our only wide-ranging common magnolia. And it's spectacular. It's the size of a bat. These big silk moths are easily the most popular moths amongst the masses, I would say. I'll show you a few more in here, but look at the caterpillar of this thing. It's crazy. It's just this big, pale bag of goo that's bigger than your thumb with these little horns on it and all. But look at the back end of it. It's a little smiling unicorn. These are just an endless source of photographic fascination. Those of us that like to take photos. Here's another one. This is a fairly plain Jane looking species. It's a pawpaw sphinx, a big moth, like most sphinx are, but not that flashy. I would note, though, it's a specialist, an extreme specialist. This is feeding on pawpaw like zebra swallowtails do, but there's a lot more moths that are specialists on pawpaws than there are butterflies. And that's the rule basically in this world. It tilts towards specialization. Most moth caterpillars only eat a small suite of plants, sometimes only one species. Generalist moths that caterpillars can eat lots and lots of things, that's far scarcer. So it leans towards specialization. That's really important when thinking about conservation, protecting all of our plants, not just ones that we, for whatever reason, find more favorable. Anyway, there's the caterpillar of the species I just showed you, and it is utterly remarkable. It's even got a little blue terrier tail. Walnut sphinx, mostly a specialist on black walnut, but it'll use hickories, which are closely related as well. Beautiful little moth, sphinx moth with pinkish on it and all, but the caterpillar takes the cake. It's really something to see. Again, it's a big caterpillar, and it's a snake mimic like the other one I showed you. Caterpillars have little rows of air exchange holes down the side called spiracles. And this species can force air out of those spiracles with such velocity, it creates a very loud, audible hissing. Sounds just like a snake hissing. And when it does it, it shakes violently. That's a bird defense for sure. Birds have driven a lot of the evolution of the behavior of these caterpillars. And so that's an effort, last ditch effort to ward off the warbler from eating it or whatever. There's the biggest moth in our part of the world, normally occurring moth. And it's almost the size of that black witch, the Cecropia moth, really spectacular. I showed this on purpose on leaf litter because they often hide during the day on leaf litter. Leaf litter is a gold mine of life. And if someone indiscriminately takes a leaf blower to a big patch of leaf litter in a decent area with a lot of native flora and under some native tree, they've just killed off God knows how many organisms by doing that. Leaf litter is really important, especially for moths. There's whole groups of moths that live their whole life cycle in leaf litter. They're called litter moths. Well, there's the caterpillar of the Cecropia moth, and it's Dr. Seussian. It's just out of this world looking, and it's a really, really big caterpillar as well. So these caterpillars become as fascinating as what they turn into if they're lucky enough to make it, if not more so. Here's another one. This is one that always generates excitement when it shows up at a mothing sheet, a lit up sheet that we use to lure them in temporarily to see what's there. And it's a spider mimic, believe it or not. That's also a thing. And if you look at this from certain angles, especially down on its level, it's eerily like a jumping spider or something. And a lot of critters don't want to attack spiders as much. And so maybe there's some element of defense from that. I don't know. But look at its caterpillar. This has got a lot going on here. Again, we're talking a pretty big caterpillar, fully grown, but it's a bird dropping mimic in part. That's also a thing. Apparently, you want to look like a bird dropping if you don't want to get eaten. Nothing wants to eat that, hence the white, smeary, blue jay splat looking stuff on this thing. But what really stands out, though, are those old head capsules on the right end that are stuck to the long, stiff hairs. So caterpillars grow through molts. They usually have 5. And every time they molt and they come out far larger than they were in the previous molt. And the stage between a molt is called an instar. This caterpillar is in the last instar. Its final stage is a caterpillar. And through all those molts, somehow it retains those old head capsules, which are plasticky and like a football helmet. The reason for that is one of the biggest groups of enemies of caterpillars are parasitoid insects, moths and flies. Parasitoids kill their hosts. They lay eggs on or even inject them into the victim, the caterpillar, and the grubs of the fly or the moth or the wasps eat it alive from the inside. It'll be a horrible way to go. Anyway, when they try and land on this, it feels it instantly and instantly whacks them with the football helmet stuck to the hairs and knocks them off. So it's part of an active defense system against a dangerous group of insects to them. And it goes on and on. But after that, some of the cryptic things that we've just seen and whatnot, most moths are cryptic and they're camouflage. They blend very well with their surroundings. Then you have this. This is a rosy maple moth. It's all around you. It's very common. Red maple is a favorite host, but they'll probably use most, if not all, the native maples. But it's pink and yellow. It looks like a Teletubby. How in the world would you hide when you look like that? Until you see one in spring with the first emergence of red maple samaras or the helicopter fruit and the moth on it. And it looks all the world just like that. So even it is camouflaged in its own way. So anyway, back to that map I showed you at the beginning. We have no idea how many moths are in that region. That shows you what a wild west this element of science is, even though Lepidoptera is such an enormous group. The moth site is not well known. We think 10,000 or more species, but who knows? Butterflies, on the other hand, we would, in any of those states on my map, be able to tell you almost to the T how many there are. They're far, far better known. If I just use my own state, we have 140 species of butterflies, basically, and only half of those are common and widespread. So if you worked hard at butterflying in the state of Ohio in 1 year, you could probably rack up 80 or 90 species, but that would be your whole devotion to that. So there aren't that many comparatively to moths. Now look at this. This is a remarkable woman. Her name is Diane Brooks, and she lives on 12 and a half acres in southeastern Ohio. Kind of wooded, but very average habitat for that area by her own admission. She got into moths 13 years ago and has been fanatically mothing on her property ever since then. She's up to 1,464 species, and I'm sure that's grown since I last got a number from her. Remember, I said if you work the entire state of Ohio, you could get maybe 80 or 90 species of butterflies in a whole year. She's got that on her 12 and a half acres in southeastern Ohio. It's remarkable. If there was someone like her in every county of every state, our moth lists would be huge, much, much larger than they are. This is why we don't really know how many there are in the region of our book. So this is a $1 million question. What do they do? What good are they, as some people would term it, which is not a good way to term a question like that. But what do they do? That's what I want to talk about mostly. I'm just loosely following the book. We have a big introduction in the moth book because, we know it's important for people to understand why they're important. Anyway, moths and insects are selected species, just if you remember your biology from school. So our selected species produce tons of offspring. K-selected species, that's us, humans, or this little whitetail that was born in my yard a few years ago. They produce very few offspring, but they get really, really good parental care generally, often, as some of you know, for years and years and years. So we really, K-selected species really take care of their own. You're on your own if you are selected. They just throw the eggs out and have good luck to you. Here's a good example of this. I shot this a few years ago, and it was a female salt marsh moth on the left that laid all the eggs right above her. That's the male on the right. And there's 700 eggs there, believe it or not. She may have dumped more elsewhere. Some female moth species will lay thousands of eggs. This tells you one thing without knowing anything else whatsoever about their ecology. They're incredibly important in the food chain. The reason they have this fecundity, this prolific reproduction, is because of the predatorial gauntlet. It's massive. To get a few of them back to the reproductive stages through that gauntlet, you have to lay this sort of eggs. That means there's lots of food here being eaten by lots and lots of organisms. So little Lepidopteran 101 again, we'll go through the life cycle really quick. It's a perfect metamorphosis in a moth. A four-part life cycle. We'll just start with the eggs. This is the eggs of a hickory horndevil, which is a really large species. That's why I chose it. So we can actually see the little caterpillars coiled up in the eggs. One has already chewed its way out of an egg. Here's the caterpillar now. We're into the stage 2. This just came out of one of those eggs about 5 minutes before I took the photo. You wouldn't recognize it as a caterpillar with your naked eye. It's only a few millimeters long. Absolutely tiny, but they grow like weeds prolifically, and they don't even eat in this stage, but after the next one, they'll start eating vegetation and growing and molding and growing. And this is how that works. I switched to a different species so you can see the molt process better. This is a black wave flannel moth, and it now looks like a turtle covered in brown shag carpeting on the right or something. Before that, it looked like, if some of you of an age might remember those little troll dolls they had with the wild green or white hair up on, that's what it looked like in the stage before. It didn't even look like the same species. And it's way bigger on the newly molded version on the right too. So this is how they grow, often looking very different from molt to molt. Back to the hickory horndevil we started with. This is the third instar, third molt, and now you wouldn't miss it. This is a hefty caterpillar, and it hides in plain sight, oftentimes on the upper surface of leaves. This is a black walnut, one of its primary host plants that it eats. And it looks all the world like old walnut flowers that have fallen off. They often land on the leaves, and with age, just when it hadn't done it yet, they'll crisp up and curl up just like that caterpillar. So it might be more botanical mimicry in the caterpillar. Now the penultimate, next to last instar. This is a really, really big piece of meat here. I saw it in my car moving through the windshield in a hickory tree, and stopped and got out and shot it. And then there's the final, the ultimate instar. This is a holy grail for caterpillar hunters. It's spectacular. This one's eating a hickory. This was shot in the wild where we found it. You could hear it crunching the foliage 5 or more feet away from it. We're talking a big eater of foliage, really big caterpillar. It's often likened to a hot dog in size, which you might find hard to believe until you see it in a hot dog bun. So it really is that big. It's really amazing. And then after it pupates, so moths pupate and transform in a cocoon, where a butterfly, it's a chrysalis. And in many moths, they overwinter in a pupal stage, like this one did. But then when it emerges, it looks like that, this gorgeous bat-sized cinnamon-colored moth. And that's the whole life cycle. And most of the eggs will never, ever get to that stage. About maybe 1% survivability of eggs in general in moths. Here's a picture that really shows this transition in an amazing way. My co-author, Chelsea Gottfried, got it. I don't know how she did it, but that's called what they call a tobacco hornworm sphinx moth caterpillar, the last instar with a second instar on top of it. So the first instar of that would be maybe 1/4, third of the size of the little guy on top. So the increase in biomass is just stunning. Very few animals on Earth would increase that much in biomass. Even a blue whale, I'm not sure, does. So a lot of growing going on. Now that caterpillar I just showed you as an aside here, a lot of you know this. It's what people call tomato hornworms, which is actually a different species. And they eat your tomato plants. It's a native moth. It's an extremely valuable one, as I'll show you here dramatically in a second. But they do eat people's tomato plants. But you know, it's a specialist on the nightshade family, the Solanaceae, which is a fairly small family in the wild in this part of the world. And then we brought over these tomatoes, which are nightshades, and they took a shine to them. And now we want to kill all these hornworms, as they call them, for eating tomatoes. I would leave a few tomatoes to these, sacrifice a few plants for these. They're really remarkable sphinx moths. This is what they look like when they are growing, if they make it to that stage, and they're known as Carolina sphinx. They go by a different name as an adult than they do the caterpillar. That's also pretty common with moths as well. Now, this is on a non-native 4 o'clock, but yeah, it hovers like a hummingbird. It doesn't need a landing platform. It can hover in place and insert a really long proboscis down to the nectaries to get the nectar reward. I want to talk about this plant in that moth, though. This is one of the rarest plants in North America. It's the federally threatened prairie white fringed orchid, a really spectacular species of wet prairies. And we have them here in Ohio, and I got permission to go to a protected site after dark so I could shoot them. And this very plant's the one I'm going to show you where the action occurred. And there was a colony of them, but most of these big Platanthera orchids, our most spectacular ones probably, are pollinated by moths, if not all of them. You can see on the flower base is a long whitish green tube at the base of every one. That's called the nectar spur. And the nectaries are way down in the base of that. So you have to almost be a moth to hover in front and get a proboscis way down there. And in return, you'll pollinate the plant. So there it is. I got permission. I sat out there. I thought it was a fool's errand for a while, getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. And all of a sudden, just after dusk, like a little wraith, this large moth flutters into my plant, the one I just showed you, and went around, hit about every flower on it, and went around, hit a bunch of the other plants too. And it's a Carolina sphinx moth, the tobacco hornworm, the same species that eat your tomato plants. Look at the tongue. That's where it's got to get get the nectar reward. And then orchids have pollinia, little pollen sacs, and oftentimes the tongue itself rips those out of the flower, and then it sticks to its tongue and it takes them to a new plant, new flower, and can cross-pollinate the plant. Anyway, here's another example from last summer of this. This is a cranefly orchid. It's a fairly common species in our woodlands, but it blooms in July, and it's tough to see it in a dark understory. Plus, the plants are kind of mauve colored. They're not bright and showy or anything. How most people know this is by those leaves on the right. They're evergreen. They overwinter. They come up in the winter and photosynthesize in July, when that flowering spike is up, they are gone, completely gone, just a naked flowering spike. But anyway, you'll notice long nectar tubes on all these flowers, and this is very well known for only having moth pollinators. And it's a very, very small and select group of moths that are probably lured in by a fragrance released by the orchid that sort of mimics, it's some attractant to moth anyway, maybe even mimicking pheromones. But then the flowers are bilaterally symmetrical, and that means when the moth sticks its head in one, it forces its eyeballs into contact with the pollinia, the pollen sacs. So last year at an event in Ohio called Mothapalooza, it really is an event. You should come some year. We get about 160 people to this every year. It's fantastic. But we were doing mothing anyway one night, and this remarkable young lady named Nora Tempest, who's really a great naturalist, she ran over to me with a photo of this. It was at one of the lights. It's called a zebra concholotes. It's a great, really great moth. But what attracted her interest in mine are those little yellow things that you see on the left side of the head. Now, I had a big macro lens, so I took another picture. These are the pollinia, or pollen sacs, of the cranefly orchid I just showed you. We could not believe it. So when it stuffed its face into those flowers of that orchid, there's a visidium, it's called, this little white spur you can see that stuck to the moth's fuzzy eyeball on the left, and the yellow things on the end of the visidium are the sacs of orchid pollen. So this is pollination by moth eyeball, and that's the only way it happens. All the moths, the handful of species that visit that, the spawn of the orchid sticks to their fuzzy eyeballs and later gets taken to another flower and pollinates it. So Ohio orchids, and this would be pretty true for most of the states in the region our book covers, but they have about that many species, about 50 or so. And the vast majority of orchids are pollinated by moths. And virtually everything in the genus Platanther are. And a lot of these orchids have become quite rare. And it's a combination of habitat loss, but if we lose their moth pollinators, they're doomed. They don't have a replacement. Bees aren't going to do it. So they're really important in the world of orchids. And some of those orchids are doozies. This is one, I don't know, you must have it, I'm sure you do, but the purple fringulus orchid that can get 4 or 5 feet tall and look like just some phlox on steroids with these bright flowers. All butterflies will pollinate these too during the day, but it's moths at night doing the heavy lifting probably. And then we have little ones like this, the green woodland orchid that's just 6 inches or so tall, clearly moth pollinated. We know that because it has those long whitish nectar spurs off the flowers. But I can't find out what pollinates them. I don't know if anyone even knows. There's a lot of mysteries still to be unraveled. So anyway, back to caterpillars. These are an enormously important part of moths, the world of moths. Doug Talmy really elucidated that, and probably many of you have read his books about caterpillars and their importance. But you don't want to come back as one, I can tell you that, because the mortality rate's around 99%. Most of them are never making it to the moth stage. Everything wants to get them. This is a spectacular beetle called the caterpillar hunter, that big showy beetle that runs around trees at night. It's arboreal. And the reason it's nocturnal is because the caterpillars are just like the moths. Most caterpillars hide and hide well during the day, but they come out to feed at night. This thing's ready for them. Here's one of the little horror shows I referred to earlier, one of the parasitoid predators. This is a tachinid fly. You've all seen them. If you see what looks like a housefly with stiff hairs on it, that's what it is. And they lay their eggs on other host animals and kill them. And this is a salt marsh caterpillar. And what she's doing is just sitting there. She was still there when I left. I wanted to see her in action, but it didn't happen. She might have to wait an hour or more. She's waiting to get to the unhaired belly of this caterpillar. The evolution of those long hairs in caterpillars is very likely a method to thwart these things from being able to get to their skin and lay eggs on them. But the underbelly is as free of hairs, and that's what she's probably waiting for, a chance to get in and drop the eggs on it. Here's a wasp. There's legions of wasps that do the same. And this is a little Eulophus wasp that I caught last year out at night. It's on a drab prominent that's a sycamore tree specialist, and just a couple millimeter little wasp. And it's a Walking Dead caterpillar. She's already laid eggs on it, so its fate is to be eaten alive. This is incredibly common, this fate. There's the same thing in a different species. This is the aftermath where the Eulophus wasp grubs ate it. It's still alive, this elm sphinx caterpillar, but it's just a husk basically. And then when they're done, they all pop out of the body, like in the movie Alien, and form little pupae right there. And in a day or two, the wasp will fly out of those and start to cycle anew. Here's an active wasp hunter that's really like a cheetah wasp. This is a thread-waisted wasp that has just caught a saddle prominent caterpillar. As soon as she found it, she stung it with a punishing neurotoxin that instantly put it into a coma, essentially. She's dragging it to a pre-built crypt just off camera, a hole in the sand that she will drag it into, provision the burrow with an egg of hers, and then she'll seal the wasp in there with a layer of sand. And when Junior wasp hatches, it's got fresh meat. She didn't kill it. It's still alive. So she's preserving the meat for Junior to come, basically. Spiders get in the act. In a lot of ways, jumping spiders are opportunistic ones. The big garden spiders in your yard with the big webs, they catch a lot of moths, but they're catching anything that goes into their webs or they can pounce on. They're not specialists on moths. I want to talk about one that's really cool that is a complete specialist of moths, evolved with them. This is, for all intents and purposes, a blue jay splat or bird dropping on a redbud leaf. That's what it looks like from afar. More bird dropping mimicry. That's what it wants to look like. And she just hides there all day, but we knew what it was and went around to the front. And it's a toad-like bolus spider. This is a big chunk of a spider. It's not small at all. So she sits like that, like a little Buddha all day long, waiting for nightfall. So we came back after nightfall to see the magic. And there she is. They don't make a web. She just spins a simple trellis and drops down off the foliage and then sends out that magical line with a really sticky glob of silk at the end, like a drop of Elmer's glue, basically. But the magical part is from her body, then she releases pseudopheromones, these fake pheromones that mirror those of a small group of moths, inchworm moths mostly. So that's how moths find each other. Females release pheromones in the air, the males pick them up and fly to the female. Well, they think this is a female, and so they'll flutter ever closer to her. And then when they get close enough, she'll whip the line out really quick with a quick jerk and snag it with this sticky drop of silk and reel it in and eat it. Bats and moths, basically the essence of this part is we wouldn't have bats were it not for moths. Moths are the major food source for bats, followed by beetles, but beetles are a bit of a distant second. It's moths that are really doing the work here to support our only flying mammals, like this little red bat. By the way, you want to watch for this from here on out. It's a highly migratory bat. And during the day, they love to roost amongst the old leaves, senescent leaves of beech trees that hold their leaves all winter. And that's what this one's doing. But when it isn't doing that and it's out flying around, it's trying to catch moths, like all its other dozen comrades, species that occur up this way at least. So this is how they do that. This is a Luna moth, a male, and it looks like two ferns have been bolted to his head. Really dramatic antennae. And those antennae are loaded with pheromone receptors, so acute that it's alleged that they can pick up the pheromones of a female a mile away, certainly a half a mile away. So then they fly to her and to make more Luna moths. But the rub for the male Luna moth is he's now got to go up in the air column where the bats are. And the bats really like these big moths like this one. So a lot of times when people look at a Luna like this, a fresh Luna, the tails always jump out to them, those long tuxedo tail streamers at the end. And for a long time, it was thought that those just acted as disruptive camouflage when it's at rest amongst plants like this one is. It makes it look more like a plant or something and blend in better. That's not the reason for them at all. They're bat deterrents. So it's really common to see Lunas like this. This is a female and she's very fresh. And all the missing parts, tails and everything, are fresh bat damage where the bat went after them. But because the tails waggle, the bat's sonar, its echolocation, the sound waves, it's pinging off objects that bounce back to it and tell it where the prey is, bounce off the tails. That's what attracts the sonar. So it goes for those, just as you see here. And if all goes well for the moth, the French fry in the middle, the working parts escape this attack, and it still is alive to reproduce itself. No one takes it as far as some of the tiger moths, as far as we know. This is a really common one in this region, and maybe not this species, but some of these tigers have pseudo echolocation. So moths have ears, most of them, they hear very, very well, and they hear those incoming echolocation clicks. So when those get near enough, some moth species will just drop from the sky. It's a really simple predator avoidance technique and into the grass and hopefully avoid the bat that way. Not some of these tiger moths, they produce their own echolocation. And when they hear the bat get close enough, the clicks get loud enough, they release a sudden barrage of their own clicks. And it's been shown definitively that jams the actual bat sonar and they can't tell where the thing is anymore. And so the bat will fly right by it and miss it. Very high tech. So this would be an important message to think about with moths that probably isn't thought about enough. But this is a view of a big forest. This one is Shawnee State Forest in southern Ohio. It's 71,000 contiguous acres, just like that. The biggest fully complete forest in Ohio. But anyway, forested regions like this, when you look at that, what jumps out, of course, are the leaves. That's a lot of biomass of leaves. But very few animals, at least like birds, eat leaves. They don't eat leaves. They need an agent to convert that plant biomass into digestible food for them, and that's the caterpillars. Doing it on a scope and scale that can't even be comprehended. A shot like that in the end of summer, early September, there would be just billions and billions of caterpillars in there, converting that plant matter to a form of protein that birds, I'm just going to take birds in this case, can use. And if you are one of those caterpillars doing that, this would be Freddy Krueger looking your way. You would not want to see this. This is a red-eyed vireo, one of the most common breeding birds in eastern deciduous forests. 1 million of them colonize Ohio, for example, every year. They winter in the South American Amazonian mostly. They're really not our birds. They just come north to take advantage of our seasonal bounty of caterpillars. And they are eating those caterpillars on an amazing scale. Just in Ohio, knowing what we know of how they feed, on a long summer day, our million red-eyed vireos are conservatively eating 30 million caterpillars a day. This is just one species of bird after everything else. The reason his head is cocked, by the way, is caterpillars during the day often hide under the leaves where they're way less conspicuous. So the vireo gets underneath and looks up like that to find them. Later come things like yellow-billed cuckoo. This is a big bird, bigger than a robin. They also winter in South America, and they don't return to our neck of the woods often until early June. They wait for the caterpillar crop to get bigger. Big bird, it wants bigger caterpillars. And by early June, you've got a lot of really big caterpillars running around. Warblers, everyone likes warblers. There's 38 species that breed in the eastern United States, and we would lose almost all of them without caterpillars. It's the primary source of their summertime diet, breeding season diet. Like this worm-eating warbler, which is horribly named, it's a caterpillar-eating warbler. They don't eat worms. Here's a Nashville warbler caught in the act of opening up a grape cluster because there are caterpillars that have formed a bivouac in there, and it knows it, so it's prying the leaf open to get at those caterpillars. This bird is in May up along Lake Erie, and it's in transit from Central American wintering grounds to the Great Boreal Forest, well to our north, where it breeds. Caterpillars fueling it at every part of this journey, even in wintertime on the wintering grounds. By the way, there's about a half a dozen or so native grapes, and they're incredibly valuable plants. They're often disparaged, and people will tell you to kill them off, but that would be a mistake to kill them all off because of the heavy lifting they do, not just with moths either. Anyway, here's a northern parula, the smallest wood warbler in eastern North America. Freshly arrived back in southern Ohio in mid-April. It's this perfect synchronicity with the first hatch of inchworm moths, and that's what it's got in its bill. There's the imperiled now cerulean warbler. 80% of the cerulean warbler population's vanished in the last 50 years. It's one we really got to protect. It's an oak hickory species primarily, and it's a major caterpillar predator, just like this male's got one there. Even the vegans get on the act. This is a song sparrow, the most common eastern sparrow. It's around your house right now. And they eat plant matter most of the year, but not when they have chicks in the nest. This bird there was 5 chicks in a nest just about 15 feet from where I made this photo. And her bill is stuffed with little prominent caterpillars, all going to be stuffed down the gullets of chicks that need protein to grow at that stage, not plant matter. And it all ratchets up. All the little cuties I showed you could be eaten by these. These are very intimidating accipiters. Cooper's hawk, juvenile on the left. And you could really, basically, you could say that, Cooper's hawks are grown by native plants. And they really are, even though they don't eat plants. These are complete carnivores. That whole ratchet up the ecological scale to reach the level of a warbler or something that this is going to eat had to be spawned by native flora. They just drive the world ecologically. So I talked a little about botanical mimicry, and boy, are they good at it. This is why it's so hard for the birds to see it. This stuff is almost certainly driven completely by birds. Very, very acute visual hunters. So the more you can look like all the plants around you, the better you might evade their detection. This is one of the inchworms, a yellow slant line, looking all the world like a broken off stick, and it'll sit like that all day. The left end up in the air is the head, and even that looks like a stick that got snapped off, showing the paler inner parts of the wood. That looks all the world like a gall, and there's a lot of galls on leaves. A lot of them are the handiwork of wasps and other organisms, but it doesn't appear that a lot likes to eat galls. So I guess if you can look like one, you got it made. And this looks like a gall on a redbud leaf from afar, but it's not. It's this beautiful little red-crossed button slug. And the slug moths are one of the most charismatic groups of moths there are, and their caterpillars are completely out of this world. They're like alien space ETs or something. And they get the name slug moth because they glide like a slug across the leaf. But during the day, it just hides in plain sight like that. Come fall, and changing of the leaves where they become dappled with necrotic tissues, like this ironwood is, a lot of the caterpillars, then they take on that look as well, like this blinded sphinx caterpillar with its body also dappled in the same amber tones as the fall foliage that time of year. If you take it as far as this, though, this is an elm sphinx. It's a specialist on elms, and elms are still extremely common plants, just not the big Americans because of the Dutch elm disease. They die off before they get that big mostly. But anyway, a lot of elms out. This is a common species, but the patterning on the caterpillar's back perfectly matches the venation of the elm leaf, and it sits on the midrib under the leaf during the day. It's going to be very hard to see. Lots of leaf edge mimics. This is the best, the checker fringe prominent. It's a really common moth, and its caterpillars are big, but they eat in from the edge of the leaf, and they're dappled with green and brown and or erose or irregular dorsal surface of the caterpillar. It becomes the leaf. It can be incredibly hard to see these in the wild, and presumably for the birds as well. There's another example of a leaf edge mimic, a unicorn moth caterpillar. And my favorite, the double tooth prominent. This is another elm specialist, and the jags on the back of the caterpillar match the serration along the margins of the elm leaves. And man, does that blend in well, even though it's a really big caterpillar. The moths do too. It's hard to see moths, people like me tell people how abundant they are, and they're like, I don't see them. They might see a few fluttering around their nightlights, but you don't see them during the day because of that. Look at this gray patch prominence, a broken off little nubbin of a branch. You would never notice that. This does it even better. This is a white blotch heterocampa that often is in humid areas, and moss forms on the twigs, and the moth itself appears to have wet green mossy patches on it as well. Incredibly hard to see these things when they're hiding during the day in plain sight often. So they are important pollinators. It's not good, in my opinion, at least I try to avoid doing it, comparing one group against another and one more important than the other and all this sort of thing. I don't think that's a good way to do it, but there are way, way more moths than there are butterflies, put it that way. So there's a lot of moths out there doing their thing. They just do it under cover of night for the most part. They might even be better than butterflies because they tend to be very fuzzy overall, and so pollen really sticks to them well. But anyway, in our book, Gardening for Moths, we profile 150 plant species, natives, that are interesting ones. Now, to see the moths, if you go to the plants that attract the butterflies, just go out at night and look at the same plants, you'll most likely see a lot more moths. This is common milkweed with a spotted grass moth on it at night. This is a bold feathered grass moth, also on milkweed at night. We have to spend a lot of time out at night to get these types of shots. But this is a wonderful ornamental if you don't have it. The buttonbush, it grows in swampy areas in nature, does just fine in rich soil in a garden. I have an ornamental specimen out in front of my front door, and they have white flowers that are extremely attractive to moths. And the evolution of white in flowers, at least in many cases, might have been to attract moths. Moths are attracted to white flowers, no question about it. And then there's the cover of the book. This was the shot for it. And this is that zebra concholotes I showed you earlier with the orchid pollen on its eye. But here it is in the wild doing its thing. And this is a garden, a planted garden that I took the shot in. There's half a dozen or so of these concholotes, and the plant is called Culver's root. It's in our book, but if you ever see Culver's root for sale, grab it up. It's incredibly ornamental and it's a wonderful moth plant. Well, the little mints are very important too, with their long corolla tubes and nectaries submerged down in the flower. This is the wild bergamot, Monarda fistulosa, the common one you can buy everywhere. And there's a variegated cut moth at night taking nectar from it. This is a dingy cutworm on a thistle. And I just throw this in because I don't think any nursery sells thistles. Bold would be the nursery that would do that. As bold would be the gardener that would actually buy a thistle. So probably not everything's going to be contained in gardens, but I threw this in. We have a section in the book called Unloved Plants. And we just make the case how valuable they are for critters, but our various human sensibilities don't like to have these plants around us. But there's a number of native thistles, and man, are they heavy lifters in this world at night. But if you're bold enough, get a thistle and put it in the yard. Anyway, here's a yellow striped armyworm. The larvae of one of the species I just showed you are a similar species. And these armyworms and cutworms get a really bad rap. They're all native. They sell you a lot of poisons, really nasty chemicals to spray on your lawn because some of these species like turf grass. I'm like, more power to them. I hope they get all the turf grass, but people want to kill them off. And big mistake for a lot of reasons, but I'll just offer one. Most people like bluebirds. They like them around the yard. Yeah, I heard someone mention a bluebird thing before the talk coming up. And bluebirds love cutworm and armyworm moth caterpillars. Love them. Many of us have seen it. They're like little thrush hawks. They'll sit on a fence or a tree branch or something and watch the ground like a hawk, and then they'll dive down into the grass. And a lot of times they're coming up with one of these cutworm or armyworm moth caterpillars. It's very important part of their diet. So the bluebird, during the winter, they eat a lot of fruit. We all know that probably. But during the breeding seasons, the warm season, caterpillars of Lepidoptera, and this is almost entirely moths, dominate. It's the dominant source of their food. So again, if we don't have moths, we wouldn't have these beautiful thrushes that we like so much. Here's proof in the pudding. That was an old cool nest out in the country in Southeast Ohio that they were nesting in the punky old fence post of a long abandoned farm. It was really neat. But the male's got a big prominent moth caterpillar that he's taken to the young. So we profile 150 species of moths. That was a challenge, but we just picked some of the very coolest stuff that's out there and talked about them. And that was fun too. But the plants are the big part. It's really a book about gardening with native plants because, as I've hopefully made the case, they drive this whole train. And I'm not naive to gardeners either. I speak to gardening groups a lot. And in one myself. So we leaned heavily towards aesthetic plants. It's hard to sell people a nettle. They're not going to get too enthused, but they'll get enthused over a Turk's cap lily, which has some really cool moss specialists and moths that visit the flowers and other things. We did work sedges in. We had to. So in your state and mine, this is by far the largest genus of plants you've got, the genus Carex. Here in Ohio, there's 180 species just in this genus, and they're starting to get some credit, and even sold in the nursery trade, which is wonderful to see. There's a lot of specialists on them in the moth world, and other animals use them for different reasons as well. But we put in, I think, 4, and they're the showiest sedges, like this bucksbaum sedge, which is just almost ornamental in appearance. Swamp rosemal, another great plant, especially for rain gardens. Some really cool moth usage to these. Beard tongues, this species of beard tongues highly dependent on moths, and there's some specialists that eat the plant as caterpillars as well. Really easy to grow, very barren areas. So we tried to cover a lot of habitat types as well with what we offered in the book. All phloxes are beautiful. There are no ugly phloxes I've ever seen, but of the 15 or so species in the general region around here, this is the coolest looking one. I think if you ever see this one for sale, grab it. Smooth phlox. It's so showy. And the spicebush swallowtails like to visit it during the day, the moths at night. Asters are really an important group. You probably have, 60 species down that way, something like that. And there is a lot to choose from. They're really, really important as a group. We offered a few suggestions of the showiest one, and this is the showiest one in my opinion, smooth aster, great moth plant. Little ground covers even. This is the dwarf crested iris, which has moth action as well, and also forms this gorgeous little ground cover. Partially shade is good for it. Blooms in spring. And then trees. Trees are doing most of the heavy lifting in the moth world in terms of host plants, oaks, maples, things like that. But we can't fill our whole yard with just oaks and maples. But we have plenty of tree examples too. And the good old sugar maple is, in my opinion, the best. Tons. There's several hundred species of moth that use it as a host plant, and it looks like that in fall. It's just an amazing plant on every level. So that would be highly recommended. So I'm going to end with this. we put a lot of these throughout the book, but if you have some moth that you really like, it's fairly easy to attract it just by growing nectar plants and, of course, the host plant. And one group of moths that people love, almost without exception, are these hummingbird moths, as they're called. They're actually clearwing, they're sphinx moths. And there's two species that are really common with us, and that's this one, the snowberry clearwing on wild bergamot, and this species, the other one, the hummingbird clearwing moth. It's a little bigger and redder. And by the way, I shot that image in a wild prairie in Adams County, Ohio. Tall larkspur is rare for us, but there was a nice patch of it there, and there was half a dozen of these hummingbird moths just swarming the flowers. They love that plant. That is another plant I'll add. If you ever see tall larkspur for sale, snap it up. It is a dramatic plant, to say the least. Huge moth value too. Anyway, to have those two cool hummingbird moths that we just saw, you have to have their host plant. So here's the species I just showed you. It's caterpillar on the same species this one is eating right here, snowberry clearwing. That's the first species I showed you. And it's this, arrowwood viburnum. It's a honeysuckle specialist, almost entirely, both those species of moss. So honeysuckle's gotten a bad connotation, unfortunately, lately because of these terrible invasive bush honeysuckles from the old world that take over. But we have plenty of native honeysuckles, and that's what these two moths need. This is probably the easiest one. It's very easy to grow, beautiful plant, and both of those hummingbird clearwing moths eat the foliage of it. They also both eat the foliage of this honeysuckle. This would have to be, I would think, fairly common down your way. Barely gets into Ohio, but the vining trumpet honeysuckle, it's just spectacular. In a garden setting, I noticed it'll often hold flowers all summer long. And both those hummingbird moths eat the foliage of this as well. So this is another superb plant to have. Plus, as a bonus, you get the real hummingbirds. They love the flowers of it. And then the caterpillars of the moths are eating its foliage to produce those as well. So, gardening with native flora, you've already almost all read all these, and I'm certainly not going to do it. But again, I'll point to the middle one. So if we garden with native flora, like I've been talking about here, you create a much bigger footprint, a footprint much larger than your yard. So you're creating organisms basically, and then sending them out to the hinterlands, out to the rest of the world, in addition to luring ones into your yard to begin with. So it just spikes biodiversity, I guess, is my point with this. Even if it's only a third acre, if you got enough third acres being grown to grow animals like I'm talking about, the world would be a lot better place. There'd be lots more of these things out there. And so that was why we did the book, to try and get the moth angle of the lepidoptera, not just the butterfly angle, out to people. And that's it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jim. That was so wonderful. I'm very inspired.
Thank you. Did that stop? I think I hit stop share.
Yes, you're
Okay,
good.
Yeah,
All
thanks
right.
for having me. It's always fun to talk about moths.
Chris, are you there?
I'm here. Yeah, the photography was amazing.
Thank you.
Yes.
Um,
Does anybody have any questions? Somebody wants to know if the book is available now.
It is. Yeah, it came out almost exactly 2 years ago. And Amazon easily gotten there. That's probably the easiest way. If you were, you're in Virginia, right? Mostly.
Yes.
Yeah, it might be tough to find an actual bookstore down there. Up here, it's not too hard to find, but Jeff Bezos will gladly sell you one. He probably needs.
Yeah, we have a lovely bookstore in Blacksburg. Maybe we could ask them if they would carry it.
That would be great. Thank you.
They'll at least order it if you request it. So
yes. Okay, thank you. That would be good. But otherwise, you would have to go online. It doesn't have to just be Amazon, but you'd have to get it that way. My publisher, by the way, is Ohio University Press, and it can be gotten through them too.
Somebody
you-
wants to know what your process is like for taking moth photos. They want to know if you have any tips.
Sure. It's essential to use flash. All right. So I usually don't get into camera stuff on these, but I love to if someone asks me, then I will, but I don't bring it up. But so I shoot with a Canon R5 mirrorless camera. I'm more or less, I suppose, professional photography these days. I move a lot of product photography. So I got one of the mirrorless cameras, and I can't say enough about them. And the workhorse lens is 100mm macro, just a macro lens. But the trick is the flash. All right. So the best flash I've found is what are called twin lights. The command center sits up on the hot shoe of your camera, like a stack sticking up above. That's all the controls. And the flashes themselves clip out on the very end of the lens, and you can move them any way. And they're right by your subject. And then they have pre-light. So if I half tap my shutter, little glow lights come on at the end of the lens, and I can focus on my subject without someone shining a flashlight or anything. And that's by far the best setup I've found. It's tricky. It takes a little time. Once you're into it, and I stop me if I'm going over your head or what you want to know, but the settings are f16, ISO 200, 200th of a second. That's the easy part. Those settings are almost bulletproof with flash. The flash will compensate for the lack of light, and you just get amazing shot after amazing shot. But you got to invest in the flash, unfortunately.
Thank you. Somebody wants to know if dusk is the best time to see moths.
Dusk is a really good time. That's a very good question. There's a lot of, like the big sphinx moths I showed you. They're crepuscular. That twilight period. And when I made the shots of the tobacco hornworm on that rare orchid, that was just after dusk. So a lot of them, but I tell you, a lot of them are not at all. Here, I'll just explain really simple. When we moth set up lights that are lit up sheets, where we watch them, we'll often run out of steam about midnight. All right. So we crash, and by then there's a lot of moths. And then we'll set an alarm and get up at 4 a.m. just to see what happened in that 4 hours. And it is amazing how many more moths there'll be. The big silk moths everyone wants to see, it's very disappointing if you do a program on this because they won't be there by the time everyone wants to leave. They're often after midnight. So there are crepuscular ones that are twilight, but it's not the majority of them. One time we were doing this mothing, did the usual crash at midnight, came back out at 4, and we estimated there was something on the order of 30,000 moths all over the sheets and the entire side of the building. Never seen anything like it. Well, they were mostly army worms, highly migratory, so much so they can show up on weather radar, as like a cloud-like formation. And our lights, they must have come right over, and our lights pulled in several tens of thousands of them. So it's for night owls, is I guess my point here. The later, the better, I would say on average.
Someone else wants to know if it's true that a red light is good for exploring the garden at night.
I've never used one. I've heard that. It might be, but I guess I wouldn't go to great pains to get one. If you just want to see moths, just use a flashlight. They'll show up better, and that usually doesn't even spook them off. One thing I should mention, though, like caterpillars especially, we find a lot of those with a UV light, a purplish black light. They make flashlights now that are UV flashlights. A lot of those glow like crazy, like they've been plugged into a light socket. Like you'll see them 40 feet up the tree, like a purple squiggle up on the leaf. It's amazing. So once that got figured out, and that hasn't been known that long, our odds of finding things went way up. But that's not important for the moths. I just go out with a regular flashlight for those and just search the plants that way.
Nice.
Jim, I was curious about my daughter's going to school in Cleveland. Do you have any suggestions for any areas to visit up there that would be good areas to visit?
Yeah, Robert, there would be. There's all kinds of Cleveland Metro Parks is one of the best metro park system in the country. So they call it the Emerald Necklace. Cleveland's basically ringed with natural areas. So, and they have a robust naturalist department. And so I can't quote anything offhand, but what I would do if I were her is just look at the park district calendar, because they probably have mothing events. Most of these park districts knew that. That's been cool to watch too. This is all fairly recent, but now it's really common that they'll take people out and put up special lights and show them moths. So I would look at the park system.
Yeah, our
Okay,
groups
that's
actually
great. Thank
do
you.
that at Clater Lake. We do a moth program from time to time at Clater Lake. And
Okay.
some lights and a sheet and all of that and help people ID moths.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Oh, it's a ball. In addition to the lights, if you're very bold, you can take a gallon jug, fill it with stale beer, brown sugar, and rotten bananas, really rotten bananas. Shake it up, leave it out in the sunlight for about 3 days so it gets really nasty and ferments. That's moth bait. Then you throw it, splash it on tree trunks, and there's a whole suite of moths that they don't really come to lights, but they'll come to that stuff. So we sometimes add bait in there as well to attract moths.
I don't know how the park people would feel about that. It sounds like bears would be very attracted to that as well.
It's so nasty. I don't think even a bear would use it.
So I had an observation in the notes, but nobody's reading it, about that beautiful Harris's 3-spot caterpillar. It looked like a cordyceps infected insect to me.
Harris's. You know, that's a good point. I've never heard anyone say that. For those of you that don't know, cordyceps is a fungus that's an endoparasite that attacks all kinds of animals, insects. That's interesting. It kind of does. You're right. I've never thought of that.
Jim, what did you say your ISO was you used?
200.
200.
So basically what you're forcing, so your camera has to be, not to get wonky on this, but your camera has to be in a TTL mode.
Yep.
Through the lens metering. So the camera and the flash are communicating. If it is, the camera will just tell the flash the perfect amount of light to release to illuminate the scene properly. So once you got all this stuff set up, usually you don't change your settings even all night long. You just shoot at that. So 200 ISO is what I found works very well.
The 200 ISO f14 and
I like f16.
16.
Yeah, I like a lot of depth of field. And if you shut down much more than f16, some cameras will manifest what's called what do they call it? Diffraction. The edges of the photo will start to look a little funny because the hole is so small now, pinhole that it's shooting through. F16, you don't get any of that. So I think F16 is just a really good, solid place to be.
Okay.
And then 200, the only reason it's 200, that's the sync speed of most cameras. They won't fire a flash any faster than that. So that's the fastest shutter speed you can get away with.
Appreciate it. Fascinating.
Sure.
Do you have any comments on ferns as far as their value in the garden? I know there's some things on the book about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. We have ferns in the book. There are a number of fern specialists, moths, some really, really cool species that are strictly tied to the pteridophytes, the ferns. So yes, they definitely play a role in that. They're probably not producing near on the level of, say, the aster family or some vast, dicotyledonous plant family. But yeah, ferns are very good. Plus, they're so ornamental, a lot of them. I can't remember what we have in there. I think cinnamon fern is one. And then maybe
I'm
lady
going to look.
fern.
Christmas ferns, maybe.
In the book, I don't think we use that
No?
one.
Okay.
Though it is a cool one, but lady fern, I'm pretty sure we have in there. I don't remember. New York fern, maybe, because New York
Okay.
fern creates a little ground
Oh,
cover.
that's right. It was New York fern. Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, and by the way, in the book too, for any profiled species, we list not all the moths that use that as a host, but most of them, some in all cases, but some species you couldn't. You'd have to have another book to list all the species. So we list a lot of the species that given plant will accommodate.
Okay, we don't have any more questions in the chat. Does anybody else have a question? Apparently not. Thank you
Okay.
so much. This has been really
Yay.
fascinating.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really good deal. I appreciate it. And sorry for going a little long. I always get
Oh, no,
Oh, no,
that's
you could have gone. We felt like you could have gone.
yeah,
Yeah.
as long as there's interest. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
If you're
Thank
still there,
you.
if you're still there, I agree with Bruce on the Ophiocordyceps. It was my first thought, and I couldn't get it out of my mind when you started talking about hitting the invaders with the with what looked like fungal stalks.
Yeah. That's a great observation. I'm amazed that I've never heard anyone say that.
Oh,
It never dawned on me. And I see a lot of cordyceps and the other cordyceps. Every year I run into victims, but that never occurred to me with that.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to suggest it to some of my friends to see how they react to that.
Well, thank you so much. We ask if everyone else, we've got a few announcements after this. So if you can hang out with us, the master naturalist can hang out with us for a little while, we'd appreciate it. And Jim, thank you so much for coming and talking to us.
Yes. Thanks, Barb, and everyone else. I appreciate you tuning in, and have a good night.
Good night. Okay, everyone, we've got so many things are really heating up this spring. We're getting so many requests from different organizations for help. There are just so many opportunities for people to volunteer. A lot of it is going to be in the update that Tanya sends out. But I haven't checked. I think Hannah had some stuff to talk to us about. I'm checking our people here. I don't see her name on her list. So, okay. Carol, I think Carol had some information. Is she?
Yeah, I did. And like you said already, Chris, some of this has already been in the weekly update, but I'm just going to mention it again for anybody that hasn't looked at it yet. The CRC Trail, the Corporate Research Center Bluebird Trail orientation and kickoff is going to be on Saturday, April 12th, starting at 1 o'clock. And anybody is invited to come, whether they've monitored or not. So that's one thing. The other was Save Our Streams certification. Tanya and I are looking at having some type of a certification event in spring, but obviously we need people who are interested in doing that. So if anybody is, they can either contact myself or Tanya, and then we'll get together and try to decide on a date. The last announcement that I had is I want to ask everybody that's still on the call if you could help the membership committee distribute flyers and possibly participate in information sessions that we're going to have in April and May for the recruitment of the 2025 training class. We're making a big push this year to try to get more underrepresented groups. And so we have flyers that we want to put in churches, ethnic churches, and so on. And all of you are spread out all over the New River Valley, and that's what we're looking for. So if you would be willing to take a group of flyers and put them in local libraries or churches or really any place in your community that you think might get some visibility for people who might be interested in joining our training class in August.
So they should contact you.
Yes, please contact me.
Okay. Judy, are you with us?
Yeah,
Okay. You had some volunteer opportunities?
I have lots of volunteer opportunities. Um, as everybody probably knows, I'm very much into Clear Lake State Park volunteering. There's lots of opportunities for volunteering there. You can work in the Discovery Center. You can do programs. I've got half a dozen almost tabling events set up for both Bearwise and the state park that we need help with. But if you're interested in doing stuff for the state park, you need your background check. And so a lot of people say, okay, I'm not going to be volunteering at the state park till after Memorial Day, so I'm not going to do the background check till right before that. Well, that's right when all the seasonal staff are putting in their background checks to get hired onto the state park. The earlier you can get your background check in, the better if you're interested in volunteering as a state park volunteer. So, like I said, we've got the Seeds Festival, we've got Crater Lake Festival, we've got Cub Scout Days, Friends of Peak Creek. Those I've all double booked us for both the bear program or bear tabling event and Crater Lake, but we need help. So if you're interested in volunteering with the state park, go ahead and go onto the DCR website and volunteer and get your background check sent off. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Hannah's not here, but I'll just let you know they're having a workday project at Crater Lake on April 26th. And so they've got a number of things that they would like to have help with. So if you're interested in putting in some hours on that, that's, I think, an Earth Day related event. They're doing shoreline cleanup, they're doing planting, there's just a whole bunch of other things going on the 26th. So they need help with that.
For those, you don't need the background checks.
Right. Yeah, if you're not working with people, then the background check is not that important. But we would still prefer that you go ahead and process that sooner rather than later. Every year we end up with people contacting us towards the end of the year saying, I haven't gotten my hours. Now, with all the stuff going on at Crater Lake and in Montgomery County, there's really no reason for that. And we would really like it if you would go through your background check, and that would give you the flexibility of putting in some hours at the lake.
Have anything with the new changes that have been happening at our federal government level, changes make to our background checks?
The problem with background checks has always been staffing. They're always backed up, which is why we ask people to do that as soon as possible, because it simply takes a long time. They've only got 1 or 2 people that are processing these requests for the entire state. And so the sooner you get your information in, the sooner it gets processed.
Okay.
We have not received any information from anybody that the federal changes have affected the state, but it's early. So I would say if you have things to do like that, to go ahead and get it done as soon as you can, or at least get it in the pipeline as soon as you can.
So where we access that?
I would contact, well, Judy, if you have
DCR
that,
website.
okay.
It's
Go to
on
the DCR
our,
website.
it's
you can
on
click
the
volunteer.
New River
Excuse me?
Valley Master Naturalist.
No, DCR.
DCR.
Division of
Put the
Conservation
link in
and
the chat.
Recreation.
That's Virginia Department of, yeah, here, let me get it for you.
Judy, do those have to be done every year?
Every 2 years.
Every 2
Okay.
years.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
if you get into Yoda is the state park volunteer system. And if you do volunteer at the state park at all, please put your hours in with that also. Feels like it's double dipping, but the hours that we put in count as FTEs to an extent for the state park. So please, if you are volunteering for the state park, get into the Yoda system, which you've got to do the background check in order to get into that, and enter your hours there as well.
The other good thing about volunteering at a state park is you get points that you can use for, say, your annual permit, or points towards getting cabins and things like that. So it's a really nice benefit simply for putting in volunteer hours that you would be doing otherwise.
The only way you can get a state park lifetime pass is by putting in 750 hours volunteering at a state park. That is the only, you can't purchase them.
Judy,
And it's a lot of fun.
when does the Discovery Room open?
Memorial Day weekend.
Okay.
It's when the park officially opens for the season.
I have a question about whether Meetup is being used for all of these events that are being listed.
Yes.
Yes. I haven't got them all on there yet, but yes.
And
The
so
seed
it would
one is
behoove
already on there.
everyone. It would behoove everyone to get joined up with the Meetup group for
Yes.
the Master Naturalist
The
chapter.
advantage to using Meetup is that there's any changes in plans, you get notified right away. Better Impact doesn't do that. You would have to keep checking the calendar for that. So Meetup is just much more flexible, much more real time as far as information goes whenever we have to change things. And a lot of things that we do are weather dependent. So it's very possible that plans would change. So please sign up for Meetup.
I know you've told us, but how do we do that?
Mara, I know, has sent out emails with instructions on that, but maybe use that as a search in your emails, and she's got instructions.
And Jennifer did a little workshop Saturday at our field day and had a really nice handout that I'm sure can be sent to be printed off, can it, Jennifer? If
Yeah, I
somebody
can.
wants it.
Yeah, I can. Tanya, can I send it to you? And the next time you send out an email or the alert, you can attach that. Thank you.
I'll also put a copy of the instructions in the Better Impact, so you'll have it that way too. So emails, Better Impact, and whatever else.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. The most recent request we've gotten is from Montgomery County Schools. Apparently, each spring they do a stormwater, some kind of stormwater runoff kind of project with sixth graders. And they are looking for volunteers for Tuesday, April 15th and Wednesday, April 16th. Two different sessions, 9:20 to 11:30 and 12:15 to 2:15. And what they're doing is setting up multiple stations, and the kids go from station to station with different kinds of activities. And so they're looking for some of our people to be at some of those tables. So if you're interested in that, we're going to have that information in the update, or you can contact me and I will share that email with you.
Do we set up the station and what we're doing, or are we manning stations that they?
I think
Yeah.
they have their stations already planned.
And
Okay.
it's in the email already, so you can register. So I think you can choose when you register what you want to do and what times.
Okay, the last item we have, I think, Rebecca, if you're still with us, I think you had a couple of things that you wanted to cover. She's not here anymore.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good.
Sorry, I just had to get unmuted.
That's okay.
I want to say two things. One is a huge word of thanks to Beth and Fred Umberger for all their work leading volunteers in the old growth forests at Virginia Tech, commonly known as Stadium Woods. If you don't know, Beth and Fred have been doing this for probably going on 13 years. They've led thousands of volunteers, many of them students, but other volunteers as well, in removing invasive plants in the woods. And beyond the incredible importance of doing the invasive species removal, it's also outreach, talking with the students, especially to educate them on the woods and all the history of the woods, and teaching them about native plants as well, and the wildlife that's in the woods. So it's been very important work, and we owe a lot of gratitude to Beth and Fred for doing that. Buried in the latest email from Tanya was a request that Beth and Fred are retiring from their role of leading the volunteers, and we're looking for new volunteers or a volunteer who would coordinate and lead this. And Beth and Fred have been doing it 2 times a week, as you know, on Sundays and Tuesdays, and also for special events. That's a lot of hours. If there was someone interested, I think that we could also look at not necessarily, it wouldn't necessarily have to be done as often as Beth and Fred have been doing it, but certainly it's something that could be discussed. So I'm hoping that there's a master naturalist, perhaps maybe one of the new master naturalists, who would like to take this on. And if so, please contact Fred or myself, and we'd love to talk with you about it. So thank you so much.
I think that's it for announcements, unless anybody else has any questions or comments. Okay, thank you everyone for your patience, for hanging out after our speaker.